Great. And I will just take a moment to acknowledge and pay my respect to the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia, as we are all here from New South Wales and Queensland, and acknowledge their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today and that are here with us. And I would like to acknowledge the Widjabul people of the Bundjalung Nation, where I am currently working and coming to this meeting today. I'm very excited to have this meeting. I'm excited for you all for completing the program, and it's been great to come and see some of you in your final sessions as well. And I thank those that have completed the final survey. It's also been great to receive your feedback. So thank you to everyone who has done that. Today, as you're aware, we've got our panel of mentors, each of them an expert, and just with their wealth of experience is just such an honour and a pleasure to have them all working on the program, and obviously have them all make the time for us today to give this presentation. So I do have a slide I was just going to share. I'll just share my screen very briefly before we launch in. And excuse me, see if I can get it happening again this time. There we are. So here is our four mentors, and no doubt at least one of these people will look very familiar to you after your time in the program. We've got Craig Carter, Glenn Chapman, David Hardwick and Ellen Lewis. Now, I did just want to acknowledge that David Hardwick of Soil, Land and Food is actually here on behalf of Simon Matson. Hi, David, who's had a personal tragedy and unable to join us today. And so I just want to acknowledge Simon's phenomenal contribution to our program as well. Our thoughts are all with him at this time, and we thank David for being able to join us in his absence today. So before we do start, I did just want to let you all know and just give you a bit of an overview, I guess, of where we all landed. Because I know it's been at least, we started in November, we had our launch meeting, so I guess we're going on 8 months now since we started. And here are all our groups. So we had Longreach, Bundaberg, Roma St George, Toowoomba, Byron Tweed, Lismore, Tenterfield and Armidale. And you can see here, I think so. That one actually doesn't need to be updated. Sorry, David, we put you in there. That was Simon Matson actually working with Bundaberg there. And David Hardwick has been on another one of our RAMP programs where he was working with Bingra and Lismore, which is why that is there. So just so you're aware of that. We are going to kick off today with Craig Carter. So just a little bio on Craig. He started in the regen space in 2001, but has been grazing according to holistic principles over the past 20 years plus. He completed holistic management studies, including a diploma in 2015, and became a certified field professional in 2016. And today he's going to present on forming self-supporting groups and building on context. So I'll just stop my share and hand over to you now, Craig, I think live from the field.
Hi, have you got me?
Yeah, we've got you, yeah.
Hi, everybody. So I'm standing at the back of a horse load out of the wind whilst we're preg testing, so I've got a 10-minute interval. one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this whole RAMP program has been the collaboration between all the students, the participants, whatever we're going to call them. It's been fantastic. The self-support that they offer. Make a suggestion that they form a WhatsApp group, and all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, you're invited to join it. Talk about them going to visit each other's farms, and the next time you're on a Zoom call, they're doing it. So, and this has happened across these two groups, plus another group I'm working with in another program. What we need to do, and one of the really strong points that I've been trying to reinforce with them, is to maintain the rage, keep the curiosity flowing, and talk to each other outside this RAMP program, and build your own group. Because at the end of the day, you're probably the ferals up the gully, and everybody thinks that, as one guy was described to me by his wife, as the weed farmer by the locals, because no one else understands what he's doing. So to do this, what I've suggested to the guys is sit down, build a context for your group in the same way that we have an holistic management context. Build a context, do your values, do your future resources, quality of life, all that sort of stuff. And then use that as the basis to get together once every whenever. Might be 6 months, might be 3 months, might be 6 weeks. It depends on how far apart you are. It depends on what your interests are, whether there's commonality of interest. And don't formally structure a leader. Have someone take it in turns. So each participant organise the next meeting. So, we have a meeting today, and we nominate Simone, who's an active and enthusiastic member of the group. She's up for the next one, and she'll host it. Bring your lunch, bring a chair, bring a bottle of water or whatever floats your boat, and she might shout you a cup of coffee if you're really lucky. But go along prepared to talk about what you're doing, what your goals, your visions, your enterprises are, all, how things are evolving, and then talk about each other's issues and discuss them openly, frankly, and supportively. And I think that each of these groups that I've been working with has the capacity to be able to do that. And if you structure it, and it sort of looks like you, or if you're unsure how to structure it, speak to your mentor, because they will be on track to be able to show you how to do it. And I'm quite sure, as I am, all of our mentors will be quite happy just to handle those phone calls, because I think we've all very much enjoyed the experience, enjoyed working with you, and enjoyed this process. And let's hope there's more of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. Very wise words. I did have the opportunity to not visit, unfortunately, or catch up with Craig's groups, but just hear how active they were in getting together outside of their contact with Craig. So thank you so much for that insight and for joining us from the field. I will just introduce our next mentor to present now, and that is, I'm going to put him on the spot a little bit, Glenn Chapman. So Glenn has been working in regen farming for over 20 years and is an accredited holistic management educator. Having worked with leading consulting firms as a trainer and facilitator, he has also travelled internationally researching regenerative farming practice, and also obviously has his own farm, which he's very active on, and brings that wealth of experience to us as well today to talk about financial management, profit first, 3 keys to profit planning and monitoring. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thanks, Simone. So I thought I'd do a quick little presentation. I'm sure Simone will share these slides out with everybody as well, but just to cover off, because I think we can focus in our regenerative farming stuff a lot on production and soil and plants and stuff, and sort of forget that we have to make a profit. We have to be financially viable and sustainable, and part of building resilience through the Drought program, which this has been funded through, is actually building that financial resilience. So I thought I'd quickly run through some of the key points just to give people a refresher. So the financial management of our farming business, we're aiming at creating wealth for us, for our family, and for our community. So it's, once we're creating that wealth in our business, we can then have the ability to do stuff outside. We want to plan so we know what's happening and that we actually are creating that wealth. And one of the key things is planning profit first, which is not traditionally what's been done. Traditionally people will think about profit as the end result of what's happened through the farming year, but what we want to do is actually plan it first and then monitor and work through that. There's the 3 keys of profit that we can work on they're like the levers within our business that we can work on and improve the performance. And then one of the keys is monitoring that progress as we go along. So profit is the reason we're in business. We have these farm businesses because we need to make a profit. We need to be able to generate income to put food on the table, but also create that vision for yourself. What's your holistic context? What's your vision for your future resource base? And that creating that wealth allows us to sustain that and build that within our farms and then within our communities that surround us. So the key to that is planning that profit first, is actually making sure that our key focus is actually that we're going to create a profit and how we're going to do that. When we're talking about profit, we need to make sure we're talking about true profit though. And true profit is both ecological profit and financial profit. So there's a lot of businesses that we can look at societal wise that are making huge billion-dollar profits or even multi-million-dollar profits in agribusiness and things like that. But ecologically, they may not actually be improving their surroundings and the ecology that they're influencing. So when we're doing it, we want to make sure that we're doing both of those. So what does that mean? So from an ecological profit, we're increasing landscape function. We have things like less bare ground, increasing soil organic matter, improving soil water holding capacity, all those things, healthier, cleaner soils, more biodiversity. From a financial profit, it's an economic profit. So are we actually creating wealth if we're not creating an economic profit, when we're not creating wealth, that we have more capital in hand, that we have more resilience as a business to handle risk as it comes, like things like inflation, increased interest rates, drought, all those sort of things. So we want to create ourselves a business that's resilient to all of those things. So when we're creating a holistic financial management plan, we want to plan our profit first, as I said. We want to look at our gross margin and our enterprise efficiencies and analyze all those enterprises on our farm and which ones are contributing and doing a good job. We're reviewing our costs. So what costs are we spending? What can we reduce? What's creating wealth? What's not creating wealth? Creating a yearly cash flow plan and utilizing the holistic context and decisions, which is part of the program you guys have done. You looked at those, and within those decision checks, there are financial ones, financial weak link and gross margin analysis and marginal reaction. And yearly profit and wealth monitoring. So doing a profit and loss, looking at our asset base. Are we actually improving our wealth on an ongoing and yearly consistent basis? So when we're having that financial and economic profit, we're creating surpluses. We're increasing the value of our production assets. So both in livestock production or trees or horticulture, as well as our land asset value increasing, that we've paid ourselves. That's the key, pay ourselves. That profit is part of creating and paying for yourself. And that we've then got a surplus for wealth creation and asset replacement and depreciation. Some of the 3 levers that we've got to pull on within that are gross margins, overhead, and turnover. So we call these the 3 keys to profit, because every part of your business will fit in underneath these things. So when we're looking at a gross margin, firstly, we've got the price that we're going to receive, which is generally what people will be focusing on. That seems to be the thing. They'll go, what did I get at the markets and what's the market going? But what we have a lot more control over are things like the efficiency of our production. So how, what's our, production per tree for macadamias? What's our reproductive rate for our livestock? All those sorts of things. How many kilos of meat am I putting on? What kilos of wool am I producing? And then what's it costing us to produce that? How can I make that more efficient? And how can I utilize things like improving capture of sunlight and improving soil organic matter and fertility and things that will actually give us increases in production, but at a lowering direct cost input. So we have more control over the second two of those than we do over the price. But yet price seems to be the one that everybody focuses on. So come back, have a look at your gross margins and analyze each of the enterprises within your business to see where your best margins are coming from, where you can improve the efficiency, how you can make things better. So within those enterprises, we're looking at this production chain of production. So we're actually in the process of capturing sunlight, packaging it and marketing it. That's what our enterprises are doing. So how are we doing that? Where do we need to focus on our weak link within this? So if this is a chain that you're going to pull, one of those links will break at any one time. That's our focus for improving the performance of that business, that enterprise. So it could be that we need more resources, we need some capital, we need more land, we need more labor, whatever happens to be. It could be that we're not converting the product efficiently. We're not getting good birth rates or growth rates, or we're losing production because we've got insect attack on our trees or whatever it happens to be, or that we're not marketing in the most efficient way. Are we using sale yards? Are we using auctions plus? Are we direct selling? Can we do direct relationships through the supply chain? There's a whole range of things we can do on marketing, but there's no point focusing on marketing if we aren't producing a good product or converting that product efficiently. So this is where you've got to do an analysis of that enterprise, of each of the enterprises, to work out where your focus is to improve its performance. Our aim is to have less cash moving off the farm, so less costs, and getting more income coming back in towards our creation of our wealth and that holistic and delivering that holistic context. So when we look at improving our gross margin, as I said, we have things like yield, so for example, kilos of beef per hectare, reproduction, nutrition, grazing management, marketing, direct costs. How can we improve the performance of that? Now, whether you're in animal production or horticulture or sugarcane or whatever it happens to be, the same sorts of measures dependent on your enterprise will be there, so you can have a look at those efficiencies. The next one is overheads. So once we've done our gross margin, that surplus then goes to pay our overheads after we've paid our profit. So we're already taken our profit out first, and then we're paying that. So overheads can be extremely important. It tends to be have big impacts on our business. We can find that we're actually spending a lot of money on stuff that we may not need to. So we want to really assess where those costs are going and how we can adjust those down to a point where we're not detrimenting the performance of our business overall, but we're making sure they're efficiently being used and that we're focusing on things that are going to create future wealth as well. Once we've done those two, we can then look at increasing turnover. Now, we do turnover last because if we don't have really good gross margins, we might not even be making a gross margin. We increase more of it and we still don't make any more money. So we've got to do the gross margin first, make sure we cover off our overhead costs, and then we can look at how do we increase our turnover. So that can be through producing more, or it can be by accessing more value through the supply chain. So we can say, well, we can direct market, or we can direct sale to a butcher, or we can direct sale to a local fruit market, or whatever it happens to be with your production. But by taking out some of that supply chain costs and actually reaching further into that supply chain, you can capture more of that, effectively more of that gross margin, but increase your economic turnover of your business. But production is probably the first one. How can we produce more and more efficiently what we're doing? Do we need to get to a certain scale of our business to produce the profit that we need from our business? And our key is to actually just increase the size of that whole pie. You know, if we increase the size of that pie, then we'll get more profit out of that as well. So once we've created our profits, what can we do with that? We can, we need to make a decision around where we're going to put that profit. So we've already paid ourselves. We've got, we're looking after ourselves. Now we've got surpluses from the business. So we can reinvest them back into the weak link in our enterprises, improve the efficiency even further. We can build future resource base. We can look at what that might be from our own context. Retire debt, which is going to reduce our risk long-term and ultimately increase our wealth, or invest in our people and our family. So take people on holiday, do other things outside of the business with that. So, profit is the key to our business, and now we've got a choice to what we're going to do with it. And then finally, we need to make sure that we're monitoring what we're doing, whether that's, weekly, monthly, quarterly, but we need to monitor the metrics, so having a look at your gross margin metrics, what it is that's driving that. Set up systems to make that easy to happen. And do that. So when we're implementing our plan, we implement and monitor that cash flow, and it becomes a process where we do the implementation, we monitor it, we put in control measures. If things are off track, stuff happens, then we adjust our plan, we replan. Interest rates go up when we've been told they're not going to go up. We have to replan. How are we going to actually continue to make that profit for ourselves? So the key points is, what's the profit we actually need, and how will we achieve our vision? That we are creating true profit, so ecological and economic profit. That we've got those three levers of gross margin, overheads, and turnover to be able to improve the performance of our business. And that are we creating wealth and moving forward? So monitoring our progress towards our future context. So just a little refresher. I'll share that slides with Simone so she can send them out or put them up where they can be available. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Glenn. I'm not sure about everyone else's business, but I know that information is just so key. I don't think you can hear it enough, to be honest. And you just presented that really cohesively and clearly. So thank you.
It's applicable to any business too, even a university. Yeah.
I was thinking of my husband's business, actually, that I do quite a bit of the finances for. So there you go. Yes, definitely applied in lots of contexts. So thank you so much, Glenn. That was great. And I will just introduce now our next mentor. And as I said, we have David Hardwick here with us from Soil and Food to step in for Simon Matson today. So David is an agroecologist and has over 20 years experience in rural landscapes, farming and food systems. He's a partner at Soil Land Food, where he develops and delivers many of the extension projects across Australia, and is very well known across Australia as well. So David is going to present today on the importance of rural landscape planning as a key aspect of the transition to regen ag. And I'm not sure, are you still overseas, David? No? Oh, I can't hear you. Is that just me? No, David's been traveling. Can you hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Great.
Doesn't work with the headphones.
Okay.
Right. No, I'm back in Australia, thanks. Yeah, sorry everyone. We've had a few dramas in the Soil Land Food team the last few weeks. I've got a family in Thailand, my wife's Thai, so we had a bit of an elderly mother issue, and Simon, who some of you will know as your mentor, he's unfortunately had a tragic circumstance in his family, hence I'm filling in for him today. But yeah, all good to go, Simone.
Okay, brilliant. Over to you, David. Thank you.
No worries, thanks. Yeah. And thanks to everyone for having me on and coming in. As Simone mentioned, Dave Hardwick, I've actually been mentoring two of the groups, not in this network, but in the other program. So I'm just filling in for Simon at the moment, who's on sort of leave at the moment. I guess coming from a slightly different angle, I've had two groups that I've mentored through the 12 months. So I guess I just wanted to pull together a few thoughts out of my learnings with those groups, and I guess our collective learnings, and share them for the next few minutes. I guess the first thing that really emerged with our groups as they were going through the ramp program was obviously the importance of having a vision slash key long-term outcome slash holistic context kind of thing, really setting that up so important. And the other really important topic that kind of emerged for everyone was just the importance of making really good decisions. And I know that holistic management has a really well developed decision-making framework that's well used by the HM network, and myself not coming through the HM pipeline or kind of tradition, if you like. I come from agroecology, so we kind of have similar process, but maybe slightly different language and some different models at times. But yeah, it's the same process, and that is, how do you make good decisions in complexity and uncertainty? And that's probably the real challenge of farming and rural businesses, is that they're highly complex, which other businesses are as well, and they're highly uncertain, particularly due to climate and sort of the natural capital dimension of them, which does influence other businesses like non-primary producers as well, but primary production, with the reliance on rainfall usually, unless you're getting really cheap water, unlimited, guaranteed, makes them just a lot more uncertain. So uncertainty and complexity are the two big aspects of decision making in agriculture. And so especially when you're trying to change your farming system, say transition to a regenerative based approach, that makes it even more difficult. So you're juggling a lot of balls, and that's really what everyone explored in our groups through the RAMP process, is all the different balls that they're juggling in terms of their family business, and the kind of simple model that we kind of use to help break it all down, and following a bit on from Glenn's model he used there for the financial dimensions, having the ecological as well as the financial side to the dollars. And another way you could put that is that you've got 4 types of capital. So you've got natural capital, which is your ecological stuff. You've got your agricultural capital, of course, which is all your agricultural enterprise value and infrastructure. Your social capital, which is the people, which obviously is the primary capital in the business. And then the last one's the financial capital that Glenn went over in depth there. So kind of juggling these 4 main balls. And I guess at a key point in the process, you've got to try and pull it all together and set a clear plan, if you like, to head towards someone's coming in there from overseas, from outer space. Thanks. You've got to kind of pull it all together and make a coherent plan of where you're headed, which includes your financial stuff, obviously, and it includes your social and your context and the personal goals and the family goals. It includes that, and it includes how you're going to improve your natural capital, so improve your landscape as well as your enterprise planning, your financial planning. You've got to kind of pull it all together. And there's a key, part of that key process of pulling it together is obviously planning. And part of the planning process is being able to prioritize what are the really important things that we need to do now in the next 6 months. What are the important things we need to do in the next 2 years? What are the long-term things? But what are the priority things, levers that I need to pull in the short to mid-term? So this prioritization process is a really important one. And if we go back to the natural capital that underpins the photosynthesis conversion, as Glenn highlighted, the energy conversion process, if we underpin that landscape, because photosynthesis happens in a landscape and you're managing a landscape of soils, water, vegetation, biodiversity, rural infrastructure, you're managing a rural landscape. So you're managing this complex system that's kind of changing and shifting and moving in different trajectories depending on how it interacts with you and with climate and geography. So you've got to manage that. And so a really important step is to pull together a plan for that landscape. So can I rearrange, can I improve the dynamics and the pattern of that landscape to make it more efficient? As Glenn pointed out, efficiency is a really important one, to make it healthier, productive, efficient, and resilient. That term resilient, which obviously you guys have all explored during the RAP process. So they're the kind of 4 main outcomes for a landscape. You want it to be healthy and functioning really well. You want it to be resilient and be able to cope with large external stresses like droughts or bushfires, etc. You want it to be efficient. And this is a really important one that's sometimes not thought about in landscape planning. And for me, early in my career, being on Bruce Maynard's place, some of you I'm sure have heard of Bruce, many, many years ago when I was quite young and green, wet behind the ears, which I still am really. I remember standing with Bruce on his property and he'd put laneways in. So this is probably 20 years ago. And he'd put laneways in not too long before that time. And he just, I remember him saying to me, standing in the paddock one morning, you know, I saved myself 2 weeks a year or thereabouts in efficiency, which is pretty much a holiday. So just getting efficiency in the landscape's a really big one. And then finally, obviously, it's got to be productive as well for your enterprise goals to meet your farm business enterprise needs and generate that cash flow and income. So to get all that right, a really important step is to do rural landscape planning. Traditionally, you might call it whole farm planning or property planning. I like to use the term rural landscape planning because you actually are planning a landscape, not just a property. Property is more than just the fencing, the paddocks, the people, the roads, the buildings. It's actually this living landscape system. So these key steps of going through a rural landscape plan is a really pivotal part, I think, of transitioning, and it kind of runs concurrent to your business planning and the personal planning that obviously you need to do, and that you guys that have been through the RAMP program will have gone through or are going through or have been going through on your journey. But yeah, including in it this plan for the natural capital and how you can rearrange that landscape for the long term is a really pivotal step. I guess the challenge with the decision making around the property planning, the landscape planning side of things is often, not always, but often the decisions you make are you don't see the feedback from those decisions for quite a few years. And this is the challenge of some of the decision making in managing agriculture, but particularly managing landscapes, is that a lot of the decisions you make, you won't get the feedback from that decision, whether it's a good one or a poor one, for quite some years. It's a little bit like orchardists when they're replanting trees, a new apple variety or a new macadamia variety. One of our group in my group was replanting a significant portion of the farm, and they had major issues with the planting stock. Unfortunately, they don't get the feedback on that decision for quite a few years. It could be 4 or 5 years before they know, yep, that wasn't the right planting stock for those trees, which is a long time, big financial whack potentially. So this is the same challenge with rural landscape planning. Doing it well takes time, design, but doing it right is important, because you won't know. If I put all the fences out and in 4 years' time I go, nah, 30% of those fences should have gone somewhere else, that's not really where they should have gone. It takes you a while to get that feedback, but by then obviously there's a lot of costs have happened, a lot of potential incomes either been lost or gained, efficiencies, etc. So property planning, it's a big part of it. Rural landscape planning is a big part of this transition. The decision making, and particularly, can be improved when you're doing this by going through a creative design process, using some creativity, using maps, brainstorming, talking with family, friends, trusted advisors, of course, as well. But doing it visually is really important. Getting a map out. A map's also a great way to deal with succession planning too. Just have a map that everyone can talk to, because everyone relates to landscapes on the property. So if you just have a big map and you have issues with succession planning, a map is a really good sort of central, neutral way to discuss the property and the people and the finances in the future. It just helps because that's the landscape everyone's sort of living off and living with. So anyway, I think I've probably done my 10 minutes. Hopefully everyone that's gone through the RAMP has enjoyed it. We certainly enjoyed it. I've learned a lot from my groups, and hopefully they've learned a bit in return. But yeah, I hope this has really helped all of you guys that are going through it to transition or manage the change successfully for yourselves. Thanks, Simone.
Thank you so much, David. And yeah, great to hear your thoughts building on what Craig and Glenn have shared already. That's brilliant. And you're always very humble, but we really do appreciate all the experience and wealth of knowledge that you've brought to the program as well. It's been fantastic, and really valuable points that you've emphasised there, just as takeaway messages. I think is great. Thank you. And so I will just take a moment to introduce our final speaker, our final mentor for today's panel presentation, as Helen Lewis. So Helen is a facilitator in decision making and policy making with over 25 years of accumulated experience with families and farm businesses, organisations, policy advising, lobbying, project management, adult education, and as a farmer. So Helen is going to present today on decisions to thrive. And I'll just hand over to you now. Helen, did you want me to share your slides, or are you can?
There we go. Hi everyone. Yeah. Good to be here with everyone, and looking forward to my slide says decisions to thrive, but one of that is actually about drought management. So I was going to with the talk of El Nino and Nino and activity coming forward, maybe in the next 12 months or so, I thought it might be quite useful to run through a decision process for drought management, and it's based on the drought model that we created for drought policy we made with Ag Force in Queensland. So put my holistic policy hat on and Ag Force, and we went through this process. And so I just thought it might be useful as a point of reference for people, and just to start thinking about how do you want to experience the next drought, and how do you want to live through it. So, and make some choices now, because it's much better to do it when we're in a good headspace and we've got green grass out the window rather than when things are way too dry. So the model actually is pretty similar. It's we talk about normal or not in drought, because obviously people say what's normal these days, but not in drought. So we're probably not in drought right now. And then there's the drying phase, the dry, and then the recovery phase. And what I want to point to is actually what's really important for every individual farm to work out is what the trigger point or indicators are that you're shifting from normal to drying, drying to dry, and dry to recovery. So what do you need, or what is the environment, what are the conditions that you would you write down if you were asked, how do I know I'm moving from normal or not in drought to drying? Some people talk about we have it for our own farm by the end of February. If we haven't had our annual rolling rainfall by the end of February, we know it's going to starting to get a bit late for us to grow some serious grass. And depending on whether or not the grass we've grown any feed in that summer, depending on the rainfall and conditions. So we know that it's going to be tight, because by March, April, we start to cool down and the grass doesn't grow as much. So we're not going to grow a body of feed for winter. So that's when we start to say, right, well, do we start destocking now? Do we start changing what we're doing? Do we change class of animal? What do we change? What changes are we going to make in order to adjust to the seasonal conditions? And then, from drying to dry, it's clearly just simply again, it's about monitoring that drying period and then destocking further, etc. In the model also, there's the three, most importantly, there are three tiers, like three rings. The inside one is the economics, the money, and then the environment and the social. And so at any given phase within the drought, the ag business cycle, and we have to think about the impact on the people, the environment, and our finances. So in the normal, not in drought phase, what could we be doing to enhance our finances, the people, and our environment to maximise the benefit of that particular not in drought phase? And then in the drying, what do we have to keep doing for people, environment, and prosperity? And we go through the whole thing. So I'm just going to walk you through the process and just talk about some elements of drought and what we've got to look at. And ultimately, the end game on this is that we want to, I don't know if there's anything, and I'll go into that in the next slide. I'll just talk about that. I don't know if there's anything such as drought proofing, unless you've got very, very deep pockets. But there is actually about drought preparedness and actually being really aware. And, is the best case scenario, we are the last to go into drought in our district and we're the first to come out. I mean, to me, that's first prize. I mean, we're bound to find some dry time, but if we can be last in and first out, that's pretty good for business. So your drought 12 months instead of 3 years. You've got to be happy with that, considering that, you know, what could be the, you know, worst case scenario. So those are I just think we need to be kind to ourselves and a little bit understanding about you know, what is realistic as well, and what we can manage in regards to dry periods. So first of all, I guess, you know, drought is minimal rainfall. It doesn't sneak up on us. You know, people say, oh, it's just suddenly here. Well, you know, if you're not monitoring, it might. But we all know when soil and grass and everything dries out, we all know when animals start to lose condition. It doesn't actually sneak up on us. It's a longer process. It's suddenly not one day it's drought. So we need to be really mindful of that, and that's why it's really important to understand your indicators and to monitor. And I think, you know, David was talking about the fact that landscape function and the landscapes, you know, the changes that we see, they do take time, but we can actually keep an eye on the ball if we monitor regularly, and we actually really pick up on some key areas. Like water cycle is a pretty important part to be monitoring when we're thinking about the transition to, like, we might be moving to drought. So our ability to, the water infiltration, the water, you know, ground cover, all those things, and how our functionality of our water cycle is tracking is worth monitoring, along with the other ecosystem processes. And I've talked about drought proofing. It's what is different about drought is that there's no known endpoint. So we can't control that endpoint. So if you're going to start feeding, well, maybe that's great, but maybe put an end date on it, and for how long and how much are you prepared to spend on that. And so those are the sorts of questions you have to start asking yourself, because we don't know how long it was going to be. And a lot of people look back at the previous drought and go, oh yeah, well, that was a good decision. But if it had gone on a bit further, or was it really? Are you still coming out of the debt that you've incurred? Like, I mean, and it's all in hindsight when it has finished. We can sort of see it as, you know, as a good thing, or the decisions we made were okay. But when you were going through it, how were you feeling? Were you stressed? All those things and other aspects of that, people, environment, and prosperity, actually have to be factored in. And also, I think it's not about being stoic. It's about being honest with yourself, aware and prepared, and ready to adapt. I think, you know, stoicism is can be too locked in on a particular course. I think if with the changing environment, changing conditions, we have to adapt our management to match that. And that causes us to be, you have to have a level of self-awareness, and also be really a bit more nimble in thinking and creative. But it's 100% your decision on how you contend with your next drought. So if we look at the social elements of people, so what in each phase of, you know, not in drought, drying, dry, and recovery, how can you look after yourself and the people that matter to you in your corner? What are your family business values? Are you making decisions about drought in line with them? How do you need to live out the next drought? Do you want to be feeding animals every day? Do you want to that? Or do you want to be painting the house, doing some fencing, cleaning out some dams, going on a holiday? What things are you going to be doing and preparing for in order to spend the time in the next drought doing what is moving you towards how you want to live your life? So these are decisions we make now so we can prepare for that. But what is your capacity? And what do you need to know more about in order to feel like you're a little bit, you're in the driver's seat for the next drought? What do you need to know about your business, about the people and what they need, and what their experience of the last drought was? Maybe have that family conversation about, how did we all go? What was it really like? What do we want to do differently next time? That might be really valuable. And then if we look at the environment, so just knowing your land and indicators of drying, there's long paddock, there's long paddock, there's the soil moisture probe, there's soil testing, there's all the understanding how to use and the impact of the tools, of technology, time and living organisms, both large and small. So really get your grazing management under control and really get a handle on what that looks like for your place. Do the monitoring, get out there and actually monitor and see how you're tracking. Yeah, the grazing plans for recovery in the next summer. That's not just rainfall, it's actually rate of the growth of the grass. So you've got to monitor that, because not all rainfall grows grass. So being really mindful of that and checking how much your grass did actually grow on the rainfall you've had. Water distribution and storage that does have to be improved, so you can, make smaller paddocks. You can be more nimble in how you manage, and also then the just ground cover and animals and the cropping integration. So how you're actually enhancing those cropping lands and the organic matter and all those things happening in your cropping lands. And maybe look at some permaculture practices and design. Like maybe that's got some usefulness in your scale of production. And the biological inputs instead of chemical and other ones, which yes, it's a cost, but maybe it's going to be more benefit because it's going to bring life into the soil rather than take it out. So and look at, we can have a spray rig, but it can also spray biologics. It doesn't have to spray chemicals and, fertilizers, etc. So let's have a look at the biological inputs and add value to our soil and our landscape function rather than take away from it. So just thinking about those key elements of, how can you use technology better? How can you use your time better? And that time is wrapped up in grazing planning and the time, recovery time and things like that. And then your living organisms are both your biology, microorganisms, as well as your big, large animals, and using them as a tool to restore and improve landscape function. And then we look at the money. So, going to what Glenn just said. So, what is your financial position, your capacity and appetite for debt and risk? So really getting clear on that and in line with your context and your values. What do you need to put in place now? Do you know what your early decisions are? What is the deadline for making them? So what is your indicator between swapping in from dry, from not in drought to drying, and then right through? And even more, and really importantly, also thinking about what is it to recover? Are you recover when you first see the first blade of grass or a bit of green pick? Or are you going to wait? What is recovery for you? Is it a volume recovery? Is it the grasses have to be knee high? Or what is that recovery for you? What would you feel satisfied that you can restock or, start your business again? What is it? What does it look like? And describe that and actually be really clear on that so that, what you're doing to when it has recovered, or what it looks like for you. What activity management do you have to put in place now in order to work through, the drought that's coming? And also, how are you adapting and managing to that, to the potential change in income and, potential, just value, I guess, just the financial status of your business. And how much are you prepared to spend during the drought on what? And we don't know how long it's going to go for. So let's be careful about what we decide to do on that in regards to the resources of the business. And then make a drought plan, early signs, and what do you do in each phase. So in the slides, I've got this and basically saying, for the people, the family, community, staff advisors, rural financial counsellor, capacity, education and wellbeing. So all the people stuff. We have a normal, not in drought. What are your indicators and your policy on that for moving into drying? What's your indicator and policy for moving into the dry and all the way through? And then environment and prosperity. So that'll be included in the slides. And I just recommend that you guys maybe think about, printing that and actually doing that as a family about what is it? How are you going to move through that? Always considering the people, the environment and your prosperity in the process of managing the flow through into the next dry period. So thanks, Simone. And just to sum up the ramp, I mean, I really enjoyed being involved with the 3 groups, the Longreach, Roma, St George and Toowoomba groups, really diverse and great. And I managed to spend 2 days out at Longreach, which was awesome. And the Roma, St George crew, we caught up at Inglewood for a day. And we have had, and then a couple of days with the Toowoomba group. But yeah, look, really great. And I just love the, as Craig was saying earlier, just the group, you know, gathering and helping each other, and also that real sense of you're not alone in this journey of change and shift of headspace. And I think everyone in the groups found that too. They just were really, really happy that they were able to share and grow and feel like it was a really safe environment to let it all out and to get some steps and encouragement to carry on. And I think a really important part of all this transition is if you're not sure, just try it. Just try it on a small piece of land. Even if it's 10 acres, whatever it is you've got available, just try something, see and monitor. And just be prepared to try it. And then, you know, it's not about having to transition the whole place all at once. It's about just trying what you're prepared to try and risk, I guess, in the vein of just seeing what works and what doesn't work. So just keep trying and keep experimenting and monitoring and recording and going forward from there. So thanks, Simone. Good.
Thank you so much, Helen. Always really fascinating presentations. Thank you. And a great model there. Is that one that you developed?
Well, it was with AgForce, yeah. So in our policy, using the holistic policy, I was the chair of the Ag Policy Committee for AgForce, and we developed that drought framework, and that's now been funded by the Queensland government, and that's how they're doing their whole resilient program for Queensland in the for dry times. So
yeah, wow, yeah, fascinating. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So that is the final presentation. So we have got some time for Q&A now. Quite a small group with us online for any questions that you might have, any final questions after these presentations to our mentors. Please feel free to pop on your mic or put the questions in the chat. And we might be going question free, it's looking like. Give you a little bit more time. If anyone wants to put their camera and their mic on, please feel free. Just give you a couple more minutes in case anyone's typing. I often have it when I'm giving lectures at university that some students say to me afterwards, oh, I was typing something in the chat, but then you moved on too quickly before I finished typing. So I always just like to give a little bit of extra space. Thanks, Marion. So this one might be for you, Helen, but if Glenn or David, if you'd like to respond, please feel free.
David might be good at this one, I think.
With the soil microbes, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll handball it off to David, I think.
Well, feel free to all contribute if you'd like to. So after drought, how long does it take for soil microbes to recover?
Thanks, Helen. It's pretty quick. So bacterial populations will jump back almost straight away. If the temperature's warm enough, the moisture's there, so the bacterial groups will jump straight back into action. If the ground's is degraded, or there's bare ground and no plants, like dormant perennial grasses, for example, in northern grazing landscapes, because the plants have to start regrowing and photosynthesizing to prime the system with the exudation. So a lot of the populations will come back when the photosynthesis starts to kick in, but the microbes that decompose simple organic matter, they're just going to jump straight in as soon as there's moisture and temperature. They're back into it. So they're all dormant, waiting to go. So it does depend a bit on the condition of the landscape and how quickly photosynthesis occurs. But some of the groups are there straight away as soon as rain hits the ground. And that's why after a drought, you often get a flush of growth and that mineralization flush, which does give you a benefit. Just all that residual organic matter that was dormant, nothing was happening. It just gets broken down in a big flush by the bacteria, particularly the saprophytic bacteria, or the guys that break down just dead organic matter. But yeah, so it does kickstart pretty quickly. Fungi and the more complex soil invertebrates, so the insects in the soil, everything through to termites, earthworms, springtails, the smaller things. They take a bit of time because they're kind of further up the food chain, but a lot of them have dormancy strategies, so they will come back to life pretty quickly. Once the moisture comes. So yeah, it's pretty quick, but it all depends how well it comes back. All depends on the condition it was when it was dormant. So that determines how well it will bounce back initially.
And David, on that, so the conditions of where it needs to be before, when it's dormant, it's kind of like, some ground cover. I mean, I know in drought, like you get down to that really brown grass and it doesn't look like you've got much ground cover at all, but it can look pretty ordinary. But, it sort of has to be kind of a bit of a, fluffy surface, or what would you suggest to people to, what would be a great, what would be a great drought landscape? Ready for recovery.
Well, obviously, Helen, if you got your 3P grasses, if we're talking Queensland grazing, you've got your 3P grasses as close together as possible for your climate zone. So, tussock grasses that are close together, the closer together, or the more plants per meter, then obviously the much quicker the response, because you've got perennial grasses and they're the ones that will kickstart a landscape very quickly. Annual grasses will as well, and weeds, or whatever you want to call them, the annuals that will come in opportunistically. But yeah, perennial grasses per meter would be probably the biggest indicator. And yeah, of course, ground cover, litter on the surface, maintaining that. So they're the two big things to determine.
And those recovery plants that come in straight as come in to help that system reboot itself. The weeds and the annuals and stuff, but we sort of saw them here in the New England. Those recovery plants each year cycle through as the system starts to rebuild itself. The conditions, if we have gone to a point where we haven't been able to control ground cover, then ground coverers will come back in first, won't they, David?
Yeah, so those annual the seed bank's there and the niche is there for them. It's a highly disturbed site. So of course, nature generally tries to optimize capture of photosynthesis to self-organize the living system, and that means conversion to biological energy, really. So you've got your annuals. I mean, an example is a grazier I know in the New England, not sort of in the southern New England area, and after the really difficult 2019, their lowest ground cover was 60%. So that landscape bounced back pretty quickly. But it was interesting to see how other areas that had gone way below that threshold, it's just amazing how nature can bounce back. But of course, it's a long term. But even that extra month or 2 months, and that all adds up over the long term in terms of resilience, and it's really 10 years. Yeah.
Sorry, Dave. And I guess also actually what's under the soil is actually what matters most, really. It's how you've set it up in the last 4 years of growing heaps of grass and grazing and everything else. And then that's going to set the conditions for what the micro pantry looks like for them in drought, so that they stay around. And then that then stimulates with the rainfall and off we go. Is that?
Yep. So if you've got root biomass, which is the key driver in a grassland landscape, or savanna landscape, if you've got root biomass in the long term, then you've immediately got soil structure, which immediately means your porosity is much higher, which immediately means when your breaking rains come, the infiltration rate is much higher. So, and the aeration is higher. So all of those factors compound the recovery. Whereas if it's compacted and bare, then the breaking rains run off rather than run in. So immediately, the lag time to get that landscape back to a high functioning, resilient landscape again is a lot longer. If you've let it go down to, again, using that grazing land management language, condition D and C, the ball's dropped a lot further down. So not letting it go into those below those thresholds initially will give you that over the 10 years, you'll get a lot more even. And, you know, in the ins and outs of your dry time, your recovery time, the lag time's a lot shorter. It's the same in cropping systems as well. So.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for your contributions to that one as well. We've had a few comments in the chat. Amanda Scott, who's on our team, who had to leave early to go to another meeting, has just shared great presentations, everyone, and a big thank you. And Amanda was responsible for getting the funding for this program that I've taken on to manage from the Drought Hub. So big thank you to Amanda as well. From Adrian Gillespie, big thanks to all the mentors for their time and effort over the last 6 months. And Mark Gillespie, thanks to all the mentors for your time today. And throughout the RAMP program, I really enjoyed Helen's Drought presentation today as well. I actually had a question, and this is to all of you, and it's based on something, I guess, some feedback that I've heard recently, and I'm guessing that I've heard it, that it might be something that you all come up against quite frequently, is just around, I guess, the evidence-based of regenerative agriculture, because it is, in my thinking, it's quite a new field still. Although many of you have been practicing for a couple of decades, I know the term regenerative agriculture seems quite new, and you might disagree with that because I'm not a farmer with a huge background. Please do feel free to. And as such, I guess that that knowledge base in terms of research evidence may not be there as much as it could be, as you'd need to be doing, you know, longitudinal studies to get that level of evidence that you've all experienced in your own practice. Do you get questions of people that don't believe the science and that question that, because you do speak a lot from your experience? Does that question coming across clearly?
I think when you're talking about more effective agribusiness management, you know, that's what we're really talking about, and it's about looking at ways to maintain production with a lower cost base. Then the evidence is there, and from a grazing business point of view, look, there's plenty of discussion around, and there's been work on that for many years with economic backing of the performance of that over time. So I think one of the things from people looking at regenerative agriculture as a term, look at it as change. We've got to be careful that they don't just go from one lot of more on agriculture to another lot of more on agriculture. So we move from synthetic and you know, fossil fuel based inputs to, you know, maybe natural based inputs, but that's still an input. And I think that's why I like to talk about it from a financial point of view and make sure they bring that in all the time, because we want to make sure that any decision that we're making is improving the ecological outcome as well as the economic outcome. Like I said, that true profit. And if you then, so ultimately, we want a system that will build and operate with minimal inputs, which should have been the goal of any agricultural business, you know, ever. You know, it's not a new concept. I think we start to put a label around it from regenerative, then we say, oh, well, we can't use synthetic, so we'll just use an artificial. And that's where organic farming has gone over the years, and a lot of people have fallen in to say, well, it's actually not economically viable because all we've done is change one input for another. I suppose that's how I think about it. I don't really even talk about the scientific evidence, because the issue is that because we're now, one of the key principles to regenerative agriculture, we're understanding that we're managing in complexity, and every single person's setup is different because of their personal goal, the economics they have, the environment they're in, the production resources they have available. You know, all of those things are all different for everybody.
Yeah.
And so you need to get back to a production system where we actually are doing the experimentation ourselves and not just sitting there relying on third parties to tell us what to do, because when we do that, they tell us what to put on and not actually how to improve our profit.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at the economics of what farm profits have been kept on farm and the increase in the turnover in the agribusiness inputs industry in the last 40, 50 years, the profit is not staying on farms, it's going into agribusiness input industry. So we just, yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think, it's interesting when you go to a regen farmers gathering, it's all about solutions and opportunities and really positive, wow, that sounds great, or whatever. You can go to not conventional, just even just industry body meetings, and it's all lamenting about all the problems. So, it's a headspace thing as well. And that's a pretty good litmus test, pretty good indicator which one's better for your mental health. But also, I think what Glenn said was absolutely spot on. It's like that whole thing of every enterprise is unique. There's no cookie cutter, and it's not even in an industry, like even in a large company organization, every property they own is different because they've got different managers. The people component actually make them unique, and let alone the environment they're in. So it's a very, and I think what's one thing that has come up, I mean, there has been some, some areas that do a little bit of benchmarking, but I know that it's in holistic management, it's something that we really find difficult to do, because how do you benchmark something completely different? And also it's actually quite risky, because one person may not want to actually do what the rest of the group's doing, although they might be getting good results. It doesn't mean that person will also get good results, because they've got a completely different situation. And so we have to be very mindful of that we don't steer people down a pathway that they really shouldn't be going down, because it's not going to end well for them long term. So I think we've got to be very mindful of that. But I mean, Mark Gardner has done has done a fairly significant body of research and documenting the results of regenerative ag in people, environment, and the longer term financial well-being. So I can certainly shoot you a copy of that, Simone, for you to share with people. And so that's actually really good body of work that has been done in this area about the value. So
yeah, that'd be great, Helen. Thank you. Did you want to add anything, David?
Yeah, I was going to say, following on from the guys, it's often the one thing I try to do, Simone, is find out where that person's coming from that's made that comment. So are they an academic? Are they a conventionally trained agronomist? Are they a high input sort of cash flow is profit type farmer? Like, you've really got to find out. And then the next thing I try to do is find out what they specifically mean by regenerative ag, because obviously people have very different perceptions on what it is. So I try to get those two things to help me get a context to give them an answer. I'll give you an example, a practical example. So in 2019, there's a few of us that have been doing a lot of soil extension with the sugarcane farmers in the wet tropics. And I was lucky enough to work up there for about 6-7 years, and quite a lot. And then there was a few other really amazing there's amazing farmers up there leading the way, and then there was a lot of other extension efforts. So there was kind of this community of sort of soil health focused cane farmers emerged. And at the end of about year 8, I kind of put it to a few of the leading farmers and another extension guy that's a bit of a champion up there, quite well renowned actually in sugarcane. I said, you guys need to have your own forum so you can help your peers in a non-threatening, politically baggaged space, i.e. sugarcane, the sugar industry bodies. So I said to them, let's have a forum. And they said, that's a great idea, Dave. Let's have a regional forum. And they said, all right, well, what are we going to call it? And they had all these names thrown up. And Sustainable Cane Forum. I'm going, that's just a government name. Who's going to come to that? So then I said to them, how do you guys see yourself? And they said, well, we're regen cane farmers. I said, all right, well, we have to call it Regen Cane Farming Forum. So we knew there'd be a lot of blowback from that, from conventional industry stakeholders and extension officers and cane farmers. And if we got 40 people, I was going to be happy at Ingham, North Queensland. And in fact, we got 130. So it showed us that there was a lot of farmers looking over the fence that just wanted a safe space to come and share and learn with their peers. And the other rule of the forum was only farmers are allowed to talk. So it was farmer to farmer only. Like I was there, a few other people were there, but we weren't speaking or whatever. So anyway, it went off really well. But I had a few very conventional extension guys and mill employees of the large sugar mills come up to me during the forum and say, Dave, we heard it was advertised. We weren't exactly sure if we wanted to come because Regen Ag, we were going, nah. But now we get it. We know what you guys mean because we defined a regenerative cane farming system. We were the ones that defined what that means. And as the guys have pointed out, it's not a recipe, but there are some core elements to it. And every farming system will implement those elements differently, but there are some kind of core components to a regenerative. And so the way I kind of define it is it's a soil health based cane farming system. So as soon as you define it like that, it's non-threatening. But I guess this is the thing, you've got to really clearly define the farming system. It's the same with dairying, the regenerative dairy guys, you've got to really define the farming system for people that are skeptical, or you've got to go into the nitty gritty and say what we mean is pasture based, soil health focused, profit focused dairying. As soon as you say profit focused to a dairy farmer, their eyes open up. So, but we're very specific. Now, some dairy farmers use a bit of urea, some of them don't touch it. They still consider the elements are very similar. So I guess you've just got to be very specific because the word is used so broadly and generically, and everyone does have a different angle on it. And just the final thing from your first point was, I think the word came into common parlance or started to be socially normal about 8 years ago. So previously it was biological farming or holistic grazing, obviously has been around a lot longer. But in terms of cropping and horticulture and other industries, the word biological farming in Australia was the socially normal word to use if you weren't organic, basically. So that term, like the biological farming conference that Soil Care put on, that's been going for, I think, over 20 years. I remember going to very early ones in the early 2000s, I think. So, quite a long time. So, yeah, the term, it has morphed. It's a little bit more emotive term than biological. So obviously it's socially got a lot of traction. But yeah, you just have to be really specific, Simone. If it's an academic, I'm an agroecologist by training. You can go back 40 years of agroecology, farming system, comparative research all around the world to look at ecological and profit. And, agroecologists, that's what they do. So but most of the academics in Southern Cross Uni or anywhere else, they don't have any training in agroecology. They just, it's a whole field of agriculture, which informs a lot of what we're talking about. So for me personally, I don't have any problem with the science because I know that there's a whole body of literature. And yes, there's good organic farmers and poor organic farmers. There's good conventional farmers, and the people make it work, isn't it? It's the management. Whenever there's been comparative evaluation of farming systems, usually the main variable in differences is the management. The management field.
And leading on from all that, Simone, leading on from that is that I think one of the key things that people look at is they talk about applying regenerative agriculture, that there's this transition, and they talk about it in terms of like an organic certification, like there's this transition to be organic. But from what, as David said, it's about focus on healthy soil and healthy people and stuff. And so as soon as someone starts to make a decision around how they're going to do something differently, that they're going to focus on what the input's going to do to my soil health, which is what the biological farming stuff was talking about previously. Okay, we can use virtually any input, but what we want to do is say, okay, if I put this input on, how's it going to affect my soil biology? How's it going to affect the health of the plants and the animals and things like that? So, but the transition there's no cost. So every decision should be about putting in place a change that is both economically and ecologically beneficial. So there's actually no transition cost. It's a process you start straight away and you move forward from whatever position that you are starting at yourself.
Yeah, and the actual movement is based on a desired outcome, which you alluded to, Glenn. Like it's actually that's the focus, the desired outcome. rather than specific practices or changes or whatever. It's about doing whatever needs to be done to get that outcome.
Yeah. And because there's
that outcome's not imposed, the outcome's derived from you rather than
that's right.
salesman.
It's personal. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and the outcome is not an end result. It's a process over time. Like certification for organics is you've got to do X, Y, Z to get this certified. Regenerative agriculture, and regenerative landscape is a continuum into the future of us improving and getting better and doing things more efficient. So there's the outcome is what you need to achieve for your context and your landscape and what you want it to look like. And as soon as you start talking to people about, as David said, landscape function and what a healthy landscape looks like, being able to measure that is what we're trying to achieve, and we can continually be changing and improving that as we go on. So it's a continuum.
And Simone, just a last thought too, is that from the guys what they're saying and just pulling together from my side, usually critiques of regenerative ag, well, let's go to industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture has two primary outcomes, profit or production. And people mix them up, obviously, but they're either one of those is usually what someone's worried about. Can we feed the world? That's production. Or are we going to make money, profit? So, and that's the two primary outcomes. Of course, they're missing the third one, which is can we also look after the asset base while we're doing this, both the people and the natural capital that we all rely on, because we only got one planet. But they're usually either of those two focuses. So you can specifically argue the profit argument on a farming system with people if you have a specific example, and you can specifically argue the production system. And in some very intensive horticulture or cropping or very high input dairying systems, you can't meet the production, but that production is coming at enormous costs that aren't built into the business, i.e. or socialized, so we all suffer, or the environment suffers. So you just got to get specific where they're coming from. Are they talking, you can't feed the world with regen ag. Okay, let's pull that apart. So you just got to sort of see what their specific focus is.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. That was really interesting, and hope for others as well. Marion does have another question. So how can crop farmers speed up the growth of topsoil and soil microbe numbers?
Brown coal, Marion. No, I'm just kidding. In intensive cropping, I don't know your farming system, Marion, but if you're in broadacre cropping with no animals, so 100% cropping, it is a challenging system if the soil is in a poor condition, if it's degraded and there's low carbon and structure. It does take time. You can't kind of leap over stages of redevelopment of the soil. But the bottom line is plant roots growing with ground cover and diverse plant roots growing, and particularly putting root biomass back into the soil is critical. And that's why a pasture phase in rotation can help speed it up, because you have a perennial based pasture phase, which was the traditional farming system in a lot of areas of Australia, in the sheep wheat belt. But so it's really about building root biomass as well as protecting the surface with ground cover. Those two things are your kind of key drivers, if you like. But how you get there, obviously there's lots of different tactics, but bare ground's the thing to avoid, and plant diversity is the thing to try and add on to the top as well.
Yeah, great. Any other? No. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for the questions too, Marianne. If there's any others, please feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand or turn your mic on. Got time for probably another question or two, depending. And in the meantime, Helen has posted a link to a webinar, it looks like, 2 a.m. on the 11th of July. Is that with George Monblanc?
So it's through Oxford Uni, I think, and there's a debate, well, maybe hopefully a discussion, but it's being moderated, and between George and Alan, and George Monbiot has been a critic of Alan's work, yet he narrated the bringing wolves back into Yellowstone, which actually is an example of what Alan's been talking about, which is bizarre. So it's quite interesting that he thinks it's all, weird that what Alan's doing. Anyway, so but Alan, yeah, it will be just I know it's early in the morning, but I just thought this would be a bit of a classic experience to be part of, I think, because it'll be just interesting to see how it pans out. But yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for the share, Helen. That's great.
I know it's early, but I just thought, yeah, people might be interested.
Yeah, no, that's great.
The reference to the wolves in Yellowstone prompted me. I was listening to a podcast this week, and I'll get the link to it. I just can't quite remember who. I think it was Regeneration
Okay.
with AJ, was talking to the guys from WA who have reintroduced the dingoes, and they've got research going over there that with what they've seen happen, the outcome is more profound than what happened in Yellowstone.
Yeah, wow.
Because they've eliminated the goats and rabbits and various other things out of the system, and the regeneration of the trees and various other things within the landscape is they're saying is actually more stark than what happened in Yellowstone through that reintroduction of dingoes.
Yeah, wow. And Glenn, was that on private property or in park?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
private property.
Yeah, I've heard there's work the dingo in South Australia, and where the dingo is, it's green and lush, green, and on the other side of the fence, and there's the fence and no dingoes. It's actually the environment's dropping away.
Yeah. So they've got a girl who's come from Victoria, doing a PhD that's in there doing research at the moment, looking, and they're aging all the new trees and the old trees to show the correlation between the introduction of the dingoes and their impact on all the other animals in the system, to then the new plants coming and the regeneration of that landscape.
It'll be interesting to see if in the future we end up with dingoes inside cluster fencing, because that will actually is required to keep it alive. Just putting it out there.
I did want to share another event that's happening around the country, which I was fortunate enough to preview last week, which is Rachel's Farm, which I'm sure you've all heard of, the doco that's going around at the moment. I have put up the links through the Holistic Management website there. They've got a little page on Rachel's Farm. There are screenings up the East Coast, and then general release will be happening soon as well. Fantastic doco. Actually, I don't watch many movies, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And, Rachel's, obviously a brilliant actress in her own right, but also in this sense very raw and honest and real, sharing her journey along with Nick, the work with her.
I think I must have hit the cutting room floor.
Oh, you had a cameo in there, did you, Glenn?
I had film crews one day when we were out there working together, but I don't know that it made it in. So
okay. Yeah, it was great to see. I mean, obviously Tony Hill and Brian got a mention in there, which was great. So we do actually have some resources that we did do with Rachel and Nick. I don't know if I'm going to find them right at this second, but we do have a fact sheet on the Farming Together website, which we developed with Rachel and Nick, just about their journey in regen ag, if you want to have a little bit of a look. And I think I've got actually, that's right, that was the webinar we did, that was with you as well, Glenn. It was a long time ago, it feels like.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The working together one. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a link to that as well. So that's a webinar we did with Glenn Chapman, Rachel Ward, and Nick Green. That's probably a few years ago now. But yeah, if you're interested in a little preview to watching the doco, please do that. And just with the final few minutes, I did just want to share one more slide with you all. So I'll just get that one up. And it might not be relevant to all the live participants we have with us today, but hopefully those people who will catch up with the recording might be of interest to you. And just get my screen share happening. Let's do recording dates. So just a reminder to please complete the final feedback for the ramp. I know you can't click to that link in, sorry, I might just try and put that link in the chat as well. But we do really value your feedback. It's a really important part of our program, is that we do get that evidence on what the ramp has been like for you, and if there's changes we can make, improvements, or if if you loved it as it was, whatever your feedback is, we'd really love to hear it. There's a little QR code up the top there, and once you've actually completed your feedback, then we will send you an invitation to our special extra guest lecture presentation with Nicole Masters. So I've just put the link up there to do that feedback in the chat as well. And Nicole's going to make a presentation on the 31st of July. If you have completed your feedback already, you should have received a link to that, a calendar invitation. And yeah, Nicole's presentation is what makes a brilliant coach and an effective agent in changing initiatives, adding tools to our tool belt in asking better questions and addressing complex human, societal and ecological issues, which should be absolutely brilliant. So do your feedback, come along. We'd love to have you all there. And just a big thank you and acknowledgement that this presentation and this ramp program was made possible through the Southern Queensland, Northern New South Wales Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub. So we thank them kindly for their generous support, and again to Amanda Scott for facilitating that involvement as well. So on that note, I want to thank again all of our mentors. It has been such a pleasure to work with them all, extremely professional and knowledgeable, and also with a great sense of humour, which I've really enjoyed, keeping things light in what is a very serious point in time. And farming just has such a huge role to play in all of our futures. It affects everyone, and so the work that all our mentors are doing is so profoundly important. So I thank you all for that, and also thanking all our mentees for being involved, because without your interest and your involvement and your enthusiasm, then these changes wouldn't be taking place on farms either. It takes all of us to make these changes everywhere. It's not just one person doing it. It's got to be a real collaborative effort. So thank you all, and no problem. Marg's just shared great conversations. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Marion. And Marion's thanked us, and me and Matthew and all the mentors as well. So I think we're right on time, maybe a little bit over. So I'll leave it there, and thank you again.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks, Simone. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.